Guys, it's your average short story enjoyer, Stephen Lin. 72 Letters by Ted Chiang. This is one of the strangest stories I've ever read. Probably like the most inventive premise for a story. Premises, I guess, because there are two sort of main features of this story that are very strange. One is a complete reimagining of the biological system of reproduction, the way organisms reproduce. And the other is a kind of Jewish mysticism called Kabbalah, which uses the idea of naming to sort of get magical power over things. This is really common in fantasy. It's in the Earthsea series, it's in Aragon, and it has a long historical tradition as well, including in Jewish mysticism. The idea that if you can name something, you sort of get power over it. But this is not treated as magic in the story, it's treated as science. And it's the second story in this collection called The Story of Your Life and Others, rebranded as Arrival after the adaptation called Arrival came out. The first story in that collection is a scientific presentation of the construction of the Tower of Babel, which is an okay story. It's got some interesting ideas. So this is a sort of concept that he likes to explore, I guess, is taking religious concepts or mystical concepts and just treating them as scientific facts in the story. And so that's the world that the 72 Letters takes place in. It's steampunk, so it's a period piece. It's set in an alternate industrial revolution where people use this idea that in the story they call nomenclature of using names, writing characters to animate machines and create autonomous machines called automata. And yeah, so that's the sort of landscape that the story takes place in, which, maybe it doesn't sound all that crazy with me describing it here, but that's because I didn't get into the reproduction part and the way that works in the story, because that's the really, really strange part. It sort of takes place in a steampunk setting, industrial revolution. The main character is working on creating automata that can perform dexterous functions with their hands, because most of the machines are only capable of really rudimentary tasks like walking and, moving things around. They don't have dexterous fingers. And so the main character is a nomenclator, and he works on coming up with the names that can animate these machines in this way. And so all of that stuff is really cool and really inventive and creative, like I said, and very strange, and I've never really come across anything like that before. Those are all positives. But the story has some severe, severe flaws, in my opinion. First of all, the prose I just found really bland. It's written in a very matter-of-fact way, which makes sense stylistically in sort of presenting this mystical concept as just a scientific concept, a matter-of-fact concept. But it's so strange, and it's so different from our real world that it requires so much exposition, which is not necessarily bad. It's not inherently wrong to exposit, but the way that it's written and the way that it's integrated into the character's actions and the character's thoughts, and especially the dialogue, just just comes across as very plain and bland. And there's some downright bad writing in here, in my opinion. Stuff that is extremely amateurish. I guess I would say, like some things that writers learn right off the bat. One of the first things is that you don't want to repeat words too often. I remember one passage in this story where it says, a character fell down next to him, and then the sentence immediately after that is, and then this was next to him. So they use the phrase next to him twice back to back. Why couldn't you just use the word beside or something like that? It's just things like that that make the prose flow, make it pleasant to read. That kind of, those stylistic things are lacking in this, and lacking in a lot of the writing in this collection as well. Over explaining actions, things like that. Like he reached down and opened the door, then he walked through the door and closed the door behind him. You don't need to explain all that kind of stuff. It's very amateurish to do that. And the pacing of the story is very, very unsatisfying and uneven as well. So all of that is the kind of technical aspects that I found to be negatives in this story. The worst part of it, though, is that, especially at the end, there's kind of a twist. And so this is going to have a little bit of spoilers, but it's not really a twist. It's not really a spoiler. There's nothing to spoil in the story, really. Nothing happens, but one of the characters who's initially presented as like a good guy is revealed to be a bad guy in the most comically childish way ever, by shoehorning in these liberal politics of egalitarianism and equality and capitalism and that kind of thing, because the sort of goal of the main character in the story is to save the human race from extinction. And one of the characters is revealed. He's an aristocratic guy. He's a nobleman. And he's, at the end of the story, he comes out and he's like, yeah, we can use this technology, this naming and, these autonomous machines to basically subjugate the poor and control their population, make sure that they don't breed more than we want them to. And it doesn't necessarily come out of nowhere, because it's set up that the main character wants to help the poor by creating these machines that have dexterous functions to help them. But it's shoehorned in there in the most childish way, the most naive way. And look, I haven't read any other reviews of this story, so if I missed the point and this was a satire of like idealistic liberal politics, call me an idiot in the comments. That's fine. But it's so naive and it's so childish and it's so shallow. It's the most shallow. And also the least courageous position you could take. Like, oh, really? You don't think the poor should be driven extinct by the rich? Wow, that's crazy. That's like, you're really stepping out on a limb there. Yes, it's just especially because these ideas. So I think this was written like 20 years ago, but these ideas have been dominant in our culture for decades and decades and decades, since the 60s. And so if you're writing science fiction and you want to put in some philosophical or political ideas in there, why bother doing the ones that everyone who's going to read your story already agrees with. I don't see the point. I don't understand why it was in the story at all. But like I said, I haven't read any reviews. Maybe there's something that I missed here. Maybe I just didn't get it. But it came off as extremely cringe to me that this character who's, a good guy, just suddenly out of nowhere, he's like, yeah, we should just kill all the poor people. Okay. Whatever. But it is balanced out a little bit by the fact that the labor unions are also portrayed negatively. I think Ted Chiang might be, like a classical liberal, more of a libertarian type probably, which is common in science fiction. But yeah, even that was also extremely ham-fisted and shallow. It's like, oh, the labor unions are thugs and they use violence to coerce people to get them to get their way. Wow, I've never heard that before. Anyway, so those are the negative aspects that I did not enjoy in the story. Like I said, really cool concepts, really, really strange premises. And steampunk, I don't think I've ever read any steampunk other than this. It interests me, but I've never heard of anything that's good. And I don't really consider this story to be good. It was okay, And if you're not bothered by the sort of shallowness of the political commentary, then you might enjoy this story a lot. I enjoyed it for like the first half when it was just basically exposition about all the strange aspects of this world that differ from our own. I really enjoyed that stuff. The plot is really almost non-existent. I did mention the pacing earlier too. It's just basically nothing happens for the whole story. The guy's just researching this idea of making names to create automata. Then he finds out about the sort of imminent extinction of the human race. And then suddenly at the end, there's just like a violent chase scene that's not very well written or engaging. And yeah, so and those aren't really spoilers, I don't think. Well, actually, yeah, they literally are, but I mean, I'm telling you what happens in the story, but I don't think I'm spoiling anything because I don't think there's anything to spoil. Anyway, so, make of that what you will, if you think this is a story that interests you or not. This is my first review. I just read this story. I finished it last night. It's a novella, actually, so it's a little bit on the longer side. I'll probably be reviewing short stories mostly, and maybe some novels as well. But yeah, that's 72 Letters by Ted Chiang. I should mention the title, I don't think is ever really explained. They just say you need a 72 letter name to create this specific name that they're looking for to save the human species. But 72 letters comes from the Jewish Kabbalah and or just Jewish history in general, where in Hebrew the true name of God has 72 letters in it. So, and I don't know how this differs from the Tetragrammaton, because the name of God is Yahweh, which is the YHVH, the Tetragrammaton. I don't know how the 72 letter name of God differs from that. I'm not Jewish. I don't study the Kabbalah. I'm a Catholic, but yeah. So it's just I don't think they explain that. They do very. I say they. I don't know why I say they. He very, very shallowly explores the idea of man sort of becoming God by getting this name where they can basically create human life. That's the goal of the story. And it's just kind of breezed over. It's just kind of mentioned. There's no thoughts that I had about it. There's nothing given to me to think about. Just, oh, wow, what if man could create life? Never heard that before either. It's a weird mix of like really strange and inventive ideas, and then just like the most bland, recycled ideas that just get no attention and no kind of creative spin on them at all. Very, very uneven story. Okay, so that's my review.